You're not lazy, you're burned out, and no one told you. Part 1. The misunderstanding. If you've been telling yourself that you're lazy, unmotivated, or just not disciplined enough, I want you to pause for a moment, because there's a strong chance that what you're actually experiencing is burnout, not the dramatic kind people talk about, not collapsing or quitting everything, but the quiet kind, the kind that looks like procrastination, the kind that feels like numbness, the kind where even simple tasks feel heavier than they should. If you feel behind in life, and you've been blaming yourself for it, this video is for you. Part 2. Why lazy is the wrong word. Lazy is a word people use when they don't understand what's really happening. It's a shortcut explanation, a label that ignores context. Most people who feel lazy actually care deeply. They think about their future constantly. They feel guilty when they rest. They're aware of what they should be doing. Lazy people don't feel that kind of pressure. Burned out people do. Burnout isn't about lack of desire. It's about depleted capacity. And no one teaches you how to recognize that. Part 3. The quiet signs of burnout. Burnout doesn't always look like exhaustion. Sometimes it looks like scrolling instead of starting, staring at tasks you know how to do, avoiding decisions because everything feels overwhelming, losing interest in things you once cared about. You might still show up, you might still function, but inside, it feels like your energy is constantly drained, not because you're weak, but because you've been carrying too much for too long. Part 4. How people who feel behind get here. People who feel behind in life are especially vulnerable to burnout because they often push themselves harder to catch up, ignore their limits out of guilt, compare their energy to others, believe rest must be earned. They don't slow down because slowing down feels irresponsible. So instead they keep pushing, even when their body and mind are asking for relief. Eventually something shuts down. That shutdown isn't laziness, it's self-protection. Part 5. Why motivation advice makes it worse. Most advice online assumes you're just not trying hard enough. Wake up earlier, push through, be disciplined, stay consistent no matter what. But discipline without recovery turns into resentment, and motivation without compassion leads to shame. If forcing yourself worked, you would have already fixed this. The fact that you haven't isn't a moral failure. It's a sign that your system is overloaded. Part 6. Your nervous system is tired. Burnout isn't just mental, it's physical. Your nervous system has been in a constant state of alert, always planning, always worrying, always bracing for what's next. When that happens, your body conserves energy by slowing you down. That's why rest doesn't feel refreshing. That's why starting feels impossible. Your system isn't broken, it's exhausted. Part 7. Rest is not the same as escape. There's an important difference between rest and escape. Scrolling for hours isn't rest. Neither is numbing yourself with constant distraction. Real rest feels unfamiliar at first. It might look like doing less without explaining yourself, allowing boredom, saying no without guilt, stopping before you're completely drained. This kind of rest doesn't give instant relief, but over time, it rebuilds trust between you and yourself. Part 8. You don't need to deserve rest. One of the most harmful beliefs burned out people carry is this: I'll rest once I'm doing better. But rest isn't a reward. It's a requirement. You don't earn rest by being productive enough. You don't lose the right to rest because you feel behind. In fact, the more behind you feel, the more essential rest becomes. Not to stop your life, but to support it. Part 9. How to start recovering gently. Recovery doesn't start with big changes. It starts with honesty, admitting that you're tired, that your pace has been unsustainable, that pushing harder isn't the answer. Then you begin small, reduce expectations, Choose one priority instead of 5. Stop measuring your worth by output. Build days that don't require constant effort. You don't need to fix everything. You just need to stop fighting yourself. Part 10. What happens when you stop blaming yourself? Something shifts. When you stop calling yourself lazy, you soften. You listen. You realize you don't need to be harder. You need to be kinder. From that place, motivation slowly returns. Not as pressure, but as curiosity. Not as urgency, but as readiness. You begin moving again. Because you have energy, not because you're afraid of falling behind. Part 11. Why doing nothing can feel so uncomfortable. When you start slowing down, something unexpected often happens. Discomfort, not because rest is wrong, but because stillness removes distraction. When you're busy, you don't have to feel much. You don't have to listen closely. But when things quiet down, old emotions surface. Doubt, grief, anger, fear you didn't know you were carrying. This is why many people avoid rest. Not because they don't need it, but because rest brings honesty. If this happens to you, it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're finally giving yourself space to feel. Part 12. Productivity was never meant to define you. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned to measure our worth by how much we do. Busy means valuable. Tired means important. Rest means falling behind. But that belief slowly disconnects you from yourself. You were never meant to live like a machine that produces endlessly. You're a human being, with limits, with cycles, with seasons. Burnout often begins when we ignore those seasons for too long. Rest isn't quitting on your life. It's allowing your life to breathe. Part 13. Energy comes back quietly. One of the hardest things about burnout is that recovery doesn't feel dramatic. There's no sudden wave of motivation, no big breakthrough moment. Energy returns quietly. You notice small things first. A task feels slightly easier. Your mind feels less heavy. You laugh without forcing it. You feel curious again. These moments are easy to dismiss, but they matter. They're signs that your system is slowly rebuilding itself, and rebuilding takes patience. Part 14. You don't need to rush the healing. When motivation begins to return, there's often a temptation to rush, to make up for lost time, to overcommit again, to prove you're back. This is where burnout can quietly repeat itself. Healing isn't linear, and it doesn't need to be impressive. You're allowed to protect your energy. Even when you feel better, you're allowed to move forward slowly, without explaining why. Sustainability matters more than speed now. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not lazy. You are not broken. And you are not failing at life. You're tired. And tired people don't need judgment. They need care. You don't fix burnout by pushing harder. You heal it by slowing down enough to feel safe again. Your pace doesn't define your worth. Your rest doesn't make you weak. You're not behind because you slowed down. You slowed down because you've been carrying more than most people ever see. You're still becoming. And right now, becoming might look like resting. That's allowed.